The cell membrane operates as a bit of a boundary between the internal and external environment of the cell. And we call the cell membrane a semi-permeable membrane. And this is because it can allow some things through and it will not allow some things through. So by being semi-permeable, some things are able to enter, some things are not able to enter. So only certain materials can get in, and some materials will get through the cell membrane and into the cell or out of the cell in a much easier fashion, depending upon their structure and the way they are. So the main thing that makes up the cell membrane is lipids. So lipids are basically a type of fat, and in particular something called phospholipids. So if I was to draw a phospholipid, basically a very simple diagram, it has something called, we refer to as the head, and something we refer to as the tail. So it's got this kind of double tail looking structure like so. And what we see in the cell membrane is we'll get a number of these lined up like so. So if we just focus on one of these lipids, if we were to label this the head, label this the tail, there's two distinct kind of differences, or one distinct difference between the head and between the tail, which helps give our cell membrane a very particular structure. So the head of a phospholipid we term hydrophilic, and the tail we term hydrophobic. So hydrophilic basically means loves water, or is happy with and okay with water, and hydrophobic means hates or dislikes water. So each phospholipid has a head which really likes water and has a tail which really doesn't like water. So what this means is that phospholipids arrange themselves in something we call the phospholipid bilayer. So the cell membrane is basically made up of two layers of phospholipids that exist facing in opposite directions. So the reason for this is on the outside of the cell and on the inside of the cell we have water present. So if you remember, our heads are hydrophilic, which means they like water. So what the heads of these two layers of phospholipids do is they're going to go and face where the water is. And the reason for this is because the tails, which remember are hydrophobic, so they hate water, they don't like water, they want to face inwards towards one another, and this is so they can stay away from the water. So we end up with two layers which make up this one cell membrane, where the heads are going to face the water on the inside and outside of the cell, and the tails, which hate water, are protected by facing each other on the inside. So as a result of these properties, a whole heap of phospholipids will spontaneously arrange themselves in this manner. So nothing needs to be done apart from their place in an environment where there is water for phospholipids to arrange themselves in this way. So we also say that cell membranes have fluidity to them. So what that basically means is they can move around. So things within the cell membrane and the phospholipids themselves can actually move around a little bit. And this will decrease when things get colder. So movement will reduce, and movement will increase when things are warmer. So in colder temperatures what we'll see is the phospholipids will pack more tightly, and there'll be less fluidity in movement, and then warmer temperatures there'll be more fluidity in movement, so they'll be less tightly packed. So in order to maintain the amount of movement if we get in temperatures which are too high, or reduce the amount of packing temperatures are too low, we've also got cholesterols, which are part of the cell membrane, or this phospholipid bilayer, which try and help keep this within a reasonable level. So if I draw a bit of a bilayer like so, and okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll just draw these in a straight just to save some time. Okay, so we've got some phospholipids there. What we also might have is some cholesterol. So this is how I'm going to try and draw in some cholesterols here, like so. So what these cholesterols will do is, like I said, when things get when the environment is quite warm, they'll try and reduce the amount that the cell membrane is able to spread out, become more fluid and move. And then also when the environment gets quite cold, they will try and reduce the amount of packing and the tightness to the cell membrane. Now what we can also get is these long structures projecting themselves from the cell membrane called glycolipids. And what glycolipids are, they are a long chain of carbohydrate, and these are going to have a role in cell recognition. So glycolipids act as kind of a marker for other cells to be able to bump into and join with and recognize what type of cell it is and get some information about that particular type of cell. So overall, what we see is the cell membrane is made up of phospholipids in something which is called a phospholipid bilayer with hydrophilic heads and hydrophobic tails. It is fluid, so things can move around within the bilayer, but cholesterols are going to try and reduce this movement to a reasonable level. And we also might see some glycolipids, which are markers for other cells to recognize, projecting themselves from the phospholipid bilayer.